What is up, guys? Today I'm going to be showing y'all how to install a Spelab valve cover with the catch can option. So over here we have Pantera, which is our 2017 Ram 3500 single cab dually that y'all had probably just watched me do a whole bunch of front cover work on. So at that time I was actually doing a mock-up of how I wanted to route things with the new Spelab kit. But I went ahead and put all the OEM stuff back on it so I could give y'all a more detailed walkthrough of a how-to step-by-step process of being able to do it yourselves in your own shop. So let's get right into it. So Spelab is actually a quite new company that offers aftermarket upgrade and parts for diesel trucks in particular. However, because they are so new, they don't really offer instructions on installations, and since there is very little videos out there, I wanted to be able to make a step-by-step process video for y'all to follow along, since it's a lot easier instead of just guessing. Now, there is no right or wrong way, essentially, when it comes to installation of their products. However, I'm going to show y'all the way I will do it on this vehicle for my own personal preferences. So if y'all have different ways of doing things, that is fine. You can do that way on your vehicle. This is the way that I'm doing it on my vehicle. So with that being said, this is what we have on it right now as an OEM setup. We have an S&B cold air intake. We obviously also took off this engine cover that was right here. There was no need for it. It's just extra plastic and it's in the way. As you can see, there's no bolts in the crankcase filter cover, and that's because there was no need for me to put it all back together when I'm about to take it all apart for y'all in video. Okay, so as you're looking at your crankcase cover, 6 bolts, and then there's 2 studs that are in the very back corner, which is actually where this was sitting on one of those studs, and it's already been pulled off because that stud has been removed. They are an 8mm, so you can go ahead and remove all of those. You're gonna pull this up and off that stud that's in the back to release this harness from it, and then you can remove those 2 studs in the back. And then you're gonna go ahead and remove your oil fill cap. And once all of those are removed, then you can go ahead and take off this hose. This hose is what's attached to our vent right down there that goes to the boot of the cold air intake into the turbo. So as you can see, I've already backed those off, so we're just gonna pull that off, and then we're going to pull this red tab out. On this part right here, you're gonna push down and pull out, and then that will free this harness from the crankcase cover. Now you can go ahead and take off your whole cover. You can see that they have the crankcase filter in here. This is just held on with 2 O-rings that are underneath, so you're just gonna kind of pull up on this. All right, so moving on to your valve cover. So these are 10mm bolts. There are 6 of them, 2, 2, and then 2 in the back. Once you have all of your bolts loosened up, you're also going to push back on this red tab and then push down right here and pull out that connector, and now you're free to have this harness be disconnected. There are 2 more plugins over here. This one that obviously we don't have plugged into anything, and then this one. So again, pull back on the tab, push in on here, pick up, and now this entire harness can be pulled over away into the side so that it's not getting tangled up in your valve cover when you go to remove it. As well as you have 2 drain tubes that are right here. You have one right here and another back there. They were pushed in. I just put them back on there to show y'all where they were. And once you have all of your bolts undone and your harness out of the way, now you're able to remove your valve cover. And voila. So at this time, this is when I would recommend to anyone to check for any cracks or damage that are in the gasket. Take the time before you put it all together, otherwise you got to take it all back off. And also keep this clean. The valve cover is actually going to be in a separate box than your catch can and all of your hardware and stuff. So I will get to the valve cover here in a second, but I kind of want to go through all the hardware really quick. So you're going to have a couple different hoses. 1 smaller hose, 2 of these bigger diameter hoses. Mounting bracket. This is just a cover to not scratch up the stainless underneath, so that's why it's blue. You have this bigger filter, which has the gray mesh, and then you have this smaller filter that has a black mesh, and your catch can was in a separate box inside of this little foam shindig. All right, so now that we went over everything that's in the boxes, we're gonna kind of show you guys how to assemble like the oil catch can and the fittings and all the stuff that you need. The valve cover actually is a separate kit than what the oil catch can kit is, but because we have them together, I'm gonna show y'all how to integrate them together. So starting off with the oil catch can, the gray one comes with the valve cover versus the black one coming with the oil catch can. There are certain parts that you aren't going to use because we have the catch can instead, such as the gray filter. So just kind of set that one aside, and if you're not sure which one to use, the bottoms of them, the gray one has a stiff metal base, whereas the black one has a rubber hose base. So you need the rubber hose base one. First thing we're going to do, we're going to open up our oil catch can. This is actually a little baby dipstick, so if you have this in here, you can unscrew it and then see how much oil is in your catch can. That way you know if you have to dump it or not. And it comes with like this little steel wool looking ball of goodness. This is going to go in the bottom here to help with the filtration and get all the particles out. So you're going to put that in there, and then we're going to put the top of our catch can back on here and tighten it down. Make sure you're not pinching your O-ring, because then you'll have leaks. So make sure it's nice and even and not rolled over and nice and tight. The next thing you're going to need, 8 Allen head. We're going to take this top plug out so that we can install a little filter guy on there. You have a baggie filled with all of these fittings, and you have another baggie with O-rings. You're going to take one of the O-rings out, feed it over top of one of your fittings into the top of our catch can. And then this was a 19 millimeter. We're just going to lightly tighten it down. You might want to put your little clamp on there first. There's 2 different sizes. Make sure you have the correct size of the smaller ones instead of the larger ones. And then this can turn freely, so you don't have to worry about that. And then you're just going to tighten down the clamp here. It doesn't have to be super, super tight, just enough to where it's not going to leak. And now you have your catch can put together. Another little thing that came with the valve cover is this little elbow piece. This was for this other filter. So if you didn't have the catch can, you can run this filter. We're not going to use it. Now with the valve cover, you also have these big fittings as well that came with it. 2 hose fittings and 2 plugs. We are actually going to utilize these 2 black fittings for hoses, and they come with their own O-rings. So you're going to put it on, stick it on there. These are plastic, so be very gentle when you put them in, and then we'll tighten it down once you get up there. I'm going to show you guys how to switch these around if you want these fittings on the opposite direction. The reason being is because I have a certain plan in mind as where I want to route these hoses, and I'm going to need this front one facing the opposite direction. So I'm going to flip this over, and then we'll show y'all how to go ahead and flip that around. Okay, so this one is the one that we're going to be switching around. So I'm going to go ahead and take these bolts out. This plate will come off. Take out these other 2 Allen screws as well. And now that you have this off, you can also see the screen that is in there, as well as the O-ring that's around it. So we're going to have this be the opposite direction, and then we'll start the screws. Okay, so now that we have our 2 Allen screws tightened, we're going to put this plate back on, and now you have your port on the opposite side. We're ready to go ahead and put our valve cover on. Now keep in mind you will have a little bit of a clearance issue. When I first mocked this up in the engine bay, I had essentially the entire front side of the engine off, so it was much easier to put in then than it is now. But you're going to want to try to keep it as flat as possible, because this is what's going to be hitting the firewall. So we're going to try to fish this in here and get it underneath this fan shroud in the front here. Right. Beautiful. Because I already had this mocked up in there with the O-rings that they provided, I noticed that when I removed the Allen bolt, the machining of it shredded the O-rings. So I'm going to put in a different gasket in each bolt hole that will hopefully be able to withstand the machining. Now these are not being torqued down to insaneness. These are only 14 foot-pounds. I'm going to show y'all the little gaskets that I found that will fit on those bolts, and then the torquing sequence of tightening this valve cover down. So the O-rings that came with these bolts ended up getting sheared, and then they look like this when you take them out. So that's no bueno, because I don't want this floating around in the top half of my engine. So I had some of these Grommet assortment from Harbor Freight, and we're going to cut those in half and make our own kind of grommet. The size of the inner outer diameter, and there's a bunch of those in this kit. So this is what it would look like with the whole thing on there. However, I'm cutting them in half, a flat side and then like the rounded edge side. Another thing I found was getting washers for these so that they actually put even pressure on the rubber. These ones I found at Home Depot. They're the Everbuilt flat washers, M8 metric. They fit perfectly. We had to get 2 4-packs because we need 6 total, and we're only going to be torquing these to 10 foot-pounds so that the rubber isn't getting sucked into the machined part of the valve cover. You can see right here how well they fit inside of there. You just tighten them on down. Right now we're just going to hand tighten all of them, and then we'll tighten down to 10 foot-pounds. So as far as sequence goes, I like to start in the middle and then work my way out. So I'm going to tighten up these 2 first, and then we're going to go to the outside and then to the very back, which are the biggest pains to reach. So that's always fun. But I already went ahead and tightened those 2 middle ones. Now we're going to do the 2 front ones. Beautiful. So after you have all of your bolts torqued down, then we're going to move on to hose routing. So if you all remember, when we took off the OEM valve cover, we disconnected these 2 drain hoses on this side. These go into a Y fitting into one singular hose that goes down to a fitting on the side of the block. Pretty much down there behind the fuel pump is removing these 2 hoses completely out of the equation because we no longer need them and we need the space to route our new ones. And because I already had these out, I can just pretty much pull these up and out of the way. So now you can see that bottom fitting, that was this 90 elbow. Then moving on to this side, we are going to run this one to the vent that goes to our cold air intake tube right here. So because this is kind of wonky, we're going to do some cutting of hoses, shrinking some down to size so that they flow a little better and are a lot more neater on this side. But we're going to take this hose completely off because we also no longer need that one. And we're going to put a new hose in between here to here and route that nicely back there. Alrighty, so I kind of got a little bit distracted and forgot to video this and instead just did it. Anyways, so this is the end result of what we got going on over here. Our first port right here, I went ahead and trimmed this hose to size of what I needed for this one. I also, as you can see, kind of cleaned up all of these hoses. Took this one off, trimmed it down so it dropped that down. Took this one off, trimmed it so that it came back here. I put the harness that was tucked away over here, ran it back behind here, zip tied it there so it's all secured here. This was the attachment to that old valve cover, the OEM one. This was the crankcase sensor, so I just left that one there. This one was already detached, so everything is secured in place. And the hose over here, I also trimmed down so that this weird shaped pipe fit a little neater in that corner. So now the step that I'm on is I'm routing the hose from that back port to where I'm going to be mounting the oil catch can right here. So right below here, right in there, there is a fitting that goes into the block. And that is where that overflow hose is going to be routed to. So I just put the hose that was included in the kit, attached it to that quick press fitting, put a hose clamp on it, and then I routed it back here, and then on the back side, back through here, made sure it wasn't rubbing on anything, and then we're gonna run it through here for now. This whole intake manifold is gonna be different in like a couple weeks. So kind of this setup is temporary until the new one comes in. So I went ahead and already took off that blue cover coating because I drilled the hole that I need. I'm gonna kind of show y'all the setup that we have down here and explain it a little bit. So right here you have this coolant radiator hose bracket that's right here. This is a 10mm bolt that was right here that I took out. So I'm gonna move this up and out of the way to show y'all. This will still be on here, but for demonstration purposes, we've got our L bracket that's gonna go on this very far left hole, and it mounts perfectly right there. And then this will be mounted on our bracket with this bottom hole, and it's gonna slide in here and go to that hole that I drilled right there. And then I will cut off this excess bars and round off the edges to make a nice looking clean look. So that is the current steps that we are on. I just kind of wanted to explain that. Now we're gonna go ahead and cut this extra off, mount it, and then show y'all what the end result looks like. Alrighty guys, we've got the final setup on here. I changed a couple things, so I want to show y'all what the end result looks like, because the step-by-step process was changed so many times that I wasn't really able to walk through that with y'all. So we have this back port, this back hose right here, routed over here, under there, coming underneath the dipstick tube right here, and under this harness to a P-clip with a stud here, going into the in port, okay? So straight from the rear valve cover to the inlet. And then we have the out port on the catch can to the smaller hose that is also shared on the same stud with a smaller P-clip here, going straight down into the block that's down there. So that's how the catch can routing is set up. Now, for the brackets that we did for that's a little bit different of a story here. The L bracket that was supplied, and we're gonna use this coolant, upper coolant hose clamp bracket here to mount it in that first hole. And then I used what I had on hand bolt right here. Two up here we used for the mounting, and those were supplied with the kit. And I cut off the excess of that L bracket. Remember how it was really long? So I cut that off and used the extra ends to mount up here. So I essentially had one long L bracket that I cut, and then we made this to be a little bit higher so that we'd have clearance to take that can off, and then clearance for those hoses to be able to be routed nice and straight so there weren't big kinks in them. So this is the end result. Stay tuned for more Spelab instructional videos, because I'll have a couple more of those coming soon. So thanks guys, have a good day and keep wrenching.